Is it a cinematic sensation? Is it a masterpiece of animation? Or a terrible train wreck like Jambareeqi check? If a movie needs an exorcism, he'll smite the demon with criticism. If it deserves attention, he'll give it a heartfelt mention. A strawberry rating 1 to 5. Jambareeqi reviews.
Howdy folks, Jambareeqi here. Growing up, me and my brother slept in bunk beds. I took the top, he took the bottom. One of my fondest childhood memories was a family tradition where I would come down from my top bunk to the bottom bunk and my mum or dad would read a story to me and my brother. A very frequent author would be Beatrix Potter. I loved Beatrix's stories, not just her lovely writing but also her gorgeous artwork. So yeah, the work of Beatrix Potter is very special to me, so I took this adaptation very personally. Peter Rabbit is a mischievous critter who likes to steal food from old McGregor's house, under the belief that these are his plants because McGregor built over a spot where rabbits used to live. One day though, McGregor ends up having a heart attack, so Peter and the local wildlife take over the old man's home in celebration. Thomas is a hard-working perfectionist, but when some idiot related to the higher-ups gets his promotion, he has a public meltdown and is fired. However, when Thomas finds out that his great-uncle McGregor has died and left behind a mansion for him, he decides to refurbish it and sell it off so that he can start his own shop to compete with his ex-employee's business. When Thomas arrives at his great-uncle's mansion, his neighbor Bee insists that he lets the wildlife go freely around his home. Thomas reluctantly complies, but only because he fancies her, secretly defending his home behind her back, because he knows that he needs to protect his property. Peter Rabbit, his triplet sisters, and his cousin Benjamin Bunny see that they have a new neighbor, one that is getting closer to their friend Bee. They decide to attack Thomas's home in hopes of defeating him and taking back what they believe is theirs. This movie is not faithful to the work of Beatrix Potter at all. While Potter's Peter Rabbit was a wholesome and nuanced tale of disciplinarian values, teaching kids to behave and keep safe, this film is far more anarchic, over-the-top and cartoony, resembling the movie Hop more than anything related to Beatrix Potter. It's like the filmmakers weren't confident that children would have the patience and intelligence to enjoy Potter's subtle storytelling, so they gave Peter a makeover to make him more hip, modern and irreverent, which is bound to offend purist fans of the author's books. So, okay, these filmmakers want to present their own version of Peter Rabbit, one for today's generation. However, I'm only accepting of this if the alterations and updates are actually good, changes that work in the long run. Unfortunately, this film is not a good example of repackaging a beloved piece of children's literature to 2010's kids. This film's version of Peter Rabbit isn't even an original story. The movie follows the template of animals defending their home, a narrative that has been done to death so many countless times that the list could fill a 500-page book by now. The rabbits aren't defending their woodland forest from destructive humans, but rather invading the house of a man who legally owns this land now. Yes, rabbits used to live in this spot, but Thomas is simply inheriting what's legally his. Yes, the rabbits don't understand human property laws, but they know full well that Thomas wasn't the one who built over their spot, so they have no right to make it all so personal. Bee tells Thomas that he has to share his home with the wildlife. Excuse me, but this is his house. You can't guilt your neighbor into letting animals run riot in a place they rightfully own. You are totally welcome to let rabbits go in your house, but it's rude and inconsiderate to look down on anyone who doesn't do the same. I don't even feel sorry for these animals. They're all very annoying. I'm a vegetarian and I wouldn't blame Thomas for turning these little buggers into pies. They're always trying way too hard to make us laugh, bouncing around like they're high on sugar, and their methods of antagonizing Thomas can be downright mean-spirited. These aren't silly pranks, they're acts of deviant cruelty. Clamping animal traps on his body, wiring his house to electrocute him, and abusing his sensitive blueberry allergy. a sequence that was strongly criticised as it tapped into allergy sufferers' worst nightmares for comical effect and presented allergy bullying as acceptably funny. Allergy bullying is a real problem, it has to be discouraged, and a children's film shouldn't be normalising it or telling kids it's okay to laugh at. This movie has a responsibility to its impressionable young audience. Although, kudos to the filmmakers for apologising for the scene, that's very mature of them. The film does address the ethics of the rabbit's invasion, but it takes Peter forever to admit that he's basically being a bully. He antagonises Thomas for so long that it's hard to believe that he has a conscience deep down. So when he does finally feel sorry for his victim, it's all too late, and I don't buy that he genuinely feels bad. He's only developing guilt at this point because the plot calls for it. It's like the mentality of the script was, we've run out of ways to humiliate Thomas, let's just give Peter a heart now. The film can also be insultingly patronising at times too. It doesn't trust its audience to be smart enough to understand the character's psychology, so they have the rabbits themselves spell things out, like we are too dumb to realise that Peter has mummy issues or that Benjamin is easily led.
You sure you know what you're doing?
What? We're trying to get our garden back.
Is that really what this is all about?
Of course, that's what it's about. You think I've got some kind of ulterior motive that I'm harboring some kind of emotional connection to her because of losing my own mother and father, and I think if she goes, what have I got? Come on, Benjamin.
Why does he get to go?
Yeah. Why do I have to go in?
Because that's his character flaw. He goes along with everything I say, no matter how stupid and reckless it is.
No, I don't. You're not the boss of me.
Benjamin.
Coming.
It tries to frame these on-the-nose character developments as meta-comedy, but that's not a consistent humour style that the film is going for. The movie usually tends to only break the fourth wall when it wants to over-explain something to the audience, out of fear that we can't read into the characters ourselves. Many of this film's problems would be easily forgiven if the comedy was actually funny. But every joke falls flatter than a pancake, and each gag is repeated again and again and again. It's so overbearing watching a film tell the same 5 jokes ad nauseum. I can imagine all the silly slapstick making very young children laugh, but not because the film's humour is clever or good. It's just very easy to make kids this age laugh at these kinds of things. The only saving grace for the film, to me, is the cute romance between Thomas and Bea. While I have mixed feelings about them both as characters, their scenes together display some believable chemistry, and they make for a rather charming couple. The romance isn't a powerful love story or anything, but it's still kind of sweet, and their scenes together were the only parts of the film that I could tolerate. I'm going to give 1 point to the content. Peter is a horrible character to me. He's irritating as hell, always trying too hard to be funny, throwing one unfunny line after another at the audience, not a single one landing for me. He's also a self-entitled aggressive sociopath, using his psychological issues to entitle him to bully his neighbour. Yes, he does eventually admit that he's been behaving like a jerk for the whole film, even though it's taken forever to get there, and tries to repair his damage, but does he learn his lesson and stick to his new values? Nope. One scene later, he's bullying a couple who have now bought the house fair and square. Yes, this couple aren't very friendly, but they don't deserve to be bullied like Thomas was, and it all proves that Peter hasn't matured. Peter is only a good guy when the writers feel like it. The film tries to make us feel sorry for him by showing that he saw his dad being killed by Thomas's great uncle, but taking a parent away from an unlikable character doesn't automatically make me sympathize with them. That's just emotional manipulation. Thomas is a very uptight man, but we can understand his frustrations, from someone incompetent stealing his promotion to annoying wildlife trying to provoke him. He's a decent guy deep down too, as he does like to help others in need, and he'll use his perfectionism to make customers happy. But it can still be difficult to enjoy his company, because he can be spitefully snobby, and he will lose his temper when he doesn't get what he wants. Like with Peter, the film tries to give Thomas a tragic backstory to earn audience sympathy, but again, it's just an easy way to manipulate us into feeling bad for him. Bea is a very friendly woman with a talent for art and clearly based on the real Beatrix Potter. She's supposed to be the sensible one out of all the characters, yet she was the one who made Peter feel entitled to invade Thomas's home and told Thomas that he's a bad guy if he doesn't let them in. Not to mention, she can't make up her mind about how morally conscious and intelligent rabbits are. She'll talk to them like they understand her, but then other times she treats them like they're innocently naive. In one scene, Thomas frames Peter for ruining Bee's art, and she buys this, throwing Peter out for his misdeed. Then, when Peter frames Thomas for setting off explosives, Bee doesn't buy that it was the rabbit who did it. Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail mainly serve as comic relief, but their running joke is that they are triplets who argue about age authority. It gets tiresome watching them moan about who is the oldest or whatever. I wasn't fond of any of them, they're all as irritating as each other. Benjamin is a spineless coward who always lets Peter tell him what to do. Sure, he sometimes criticizes Peter, but he'll still go along with him seconds later after scolding him. My biggest problem with Benjamin and the triplets, though, is how the film is very forgiving of them. Yeah, they're not as bad as Peter, but they're still complicit with his attacks. The triplets may be younger sisters of Peter Rabbit, but they're not babies, they're full-grown adults. They should know better themselves. Yet all the discipline goes only to Peter Rabbit. I'm going to give 1 point to the characters. The animation for this film, which was produced by Animal Logic, is noticeably hyper-realistic. Well done to the studio for successfully managing to turn Beatrix Potter's art into the third dimension, but when the film isn't being truly faithful to her storytelling style, what's the point of praising that? It's clear that the film wants to be a silly, cartoony slapstick farce, so why not have the animation look more like Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry? Sure, this very realistic animation helps us to believe that the animated animals are sharing the same universe as the live-action actors, and it's impressive how much detail Animal Logic has put into every wildlife character, but it's a visual style that does not support what direction the film is going for. When the animals try to be cartoony, it just looks creepy as hell, and ruins the whole point of making them photographically authentic. Real animals aren't this expressive or humanized, so we reach an eerie, uncanny valley. The film does sometimes include hand-drawn animation sequences, which are very beautiful to look at, have a charming gentleness to them, and are the only parts of the film that seem to closely resemble Beatrix Potter's spirit. Such a shame this wasn't the real mood and atmosphere that the film went with. What a waste. I'm going to give 3 points to the animation. James Corden's boisterous voice is very fitting for this movie's take on Peter Rabbit. But like I said, Peter isn't exactly an enjoyable presence or a barrel of laughs, so this isn't really a compliment. Corden's Peter Rabbit is a loud, annoying sound.
He's got to go.
His face was so classic. He was like, all of the rakes. I mean, I didn't even think it would work that well. It was right on the edge of believability. You guys, how did you even get that wheelbarrow up there?
Domhnall Gleeson plays Thomas. He drops his natural Irish accent and does an exaggerated London accent instead. He's obviously having a lot of fun over enunciating his delivery and eating the scenery. It's the kind of performance that fits a kids' movie and the comedy style the movie is going for, so it's okay.
You see this, everyone? This is what happens. Why am I talking to wildlife? I am losing my mind. They're not going to respond.
Rose Byrne is very tender and soft as Bee, though personally I do think that she overdoes the sweetness to almost sickly sugary levels.
Hello. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Bee. I just live over here.
Oh, hello. I'm Thomas. I live way over there in London.
Oh. That way.
Margot Robbie, Daisy Ridley, and Elizabeth Debicki play the triplets. They're all pretty uninspired, each one doing a very generic British countryside accent. Margot Robbie gives Flopsy a lisp, but that's about it, and it doesn't really add much.
Hiya. Hiya. Why are you always on top? Because I'm the oldest. We're triplets. I'm still the oldest. By 16 seconds.
Oh, when's the last time you brushed your tail?
Whoa!
All right, rest time's over. Come on.
Colin Moody voices Benjamin. He's okay, I guess. His performance isn't exactly memorable, but he's good at sounding neurotic.
All right, talk to me, Benjamin.
He's mowed half the lawn, which maybe gives us just enough time.
Look at him. Pure evil. Even cuts grass angry.
Hey, here's a crazy thought. What if we don't go in? Because last time you almost got caught.
You're so adorable.
I could just eat you up. That's exactly what he wants to do to you.
I'm going to give 2 points to the acting. The music score for this film is decent enough. It does what it needs to do, supporting the violent slapstick with wacky zany sounds and using epic orchestral compositions to add gravity to the war scenes. Composer Dominic Lewis knows what kind of film he's scoring for, writing tracks that fit the movie's energetic tone and silly comedy, so it all fits fine. But Dominic's score is rarely utilised in the film, as the movie prefers to indulge in its jukebox soundtrack, throwing random pop songs into anywhere in the movie with no consistent theme or genre in mind. It's obvious that these songs are just a shallow attempt to make the film seem more hip and modern. I mean, when we start seeing birds miming to rap, that's when we know that the film doesn't care about its dignity and just wants to try to look cool. I'm going to give 3 points to the music. To conclude, Peter Rabbit is an annoying, unfunny, uninspired, patronising and emotionally manipulative film. An insult to Beatrix Potter's legacy that revamps her beloved, innocent, wholesome characters into unlikable sociopaths. The film asks us to cheer for these annoying animals when their actions aren't justified, and then it decides to shame them an hour later, making the overall lesson very uneven and insincere. It's Sony's half-hearted and superficial attempt at cashing in on the success of Paddington. Having impressively realistic animal animation and pretty environmental scenery doesn't disguise the film's lack of class or wit. Peter Rabbit has gained 10 points, which translates to 2 carrot-flavoured strawberries out of 5. If you enjoyed such films as Hop and The Nut Job, then you might like it. I'd just like to point out that the graphics for this video were produced by Toongrin. If you'd like to request commissions from them, here's their website on screen. I've been Jambareeqi and I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, then feel free to subscribe to my channel. Also, consider supporting my channel by making a monthly pledge to my Patreon in return for awesome rewards. Thank you. I'd like to give some shout outs to 2 of my newest patrons, Evan J. Sims and Jonathan Booth. You 2 are awesome! So, what am I going to be reviewing in the next episode of Jambareeqi Reviews? Well, that'll be this year's Halloween special. And I'm going to be talking about the highly requested Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. Cheerio, folks.